Hello, Aurora. It is Monday, June 8th. I hope you had a great weekend. So, we're going to continue with the wind. When we left off last Thursday, we were doing local winds. That would be the land versus the sea breeze. And local winds, they happen in a small area. Now we're going to move to global winds. And as the word global suggests, these are winds that cover large areas over huge portions of the earth. No matter if it's local or global, wind is still the movement of air, and we're going to have high and low pressure differences. We're going to have now big convection currents, and before we had small convection currents with local winds. And of course, we have to have those temperature differences based on the unequal heating of the earth. So, for a little review, let me get up my marker tool here. Just want to keep in mind that when we look at the earth, we have this center area where I'm kind of putting some red. This whole center line across, this is the equator, okay? And that is a warm area. It's always warm from that direct sunlight. And then if I go up, the top portion of the globe here, where my red mark is going, that's the North Pole. And way down here at the bottom, that would be the South Pole area. And the South and North Pole, they receive less direct sunlight, so it's always kind of colder there. So since we have a warmer equator and a colder North and South Pole, we have unequal temperatures, which are going to lead to high and low pressure areas, which are going to cause, as you can see on this diagram, these massive convection currents that kind of cover the Earth's surface, which are going to create ongoing global winds. So let me get rid of those marks as we did our little review of the Earth. And let's start talking about some of these global wind patterns. Let me see, let me choose a green color here. And I want to start with these trade winds. Okay, so I'm circling one example of a trade wind right now, but you'll notice there's multiple red arrows that show the trade wind in both the northern hemisphere, and then we have some down here in the southern hemisphere as well. I'm going to focus mainly on the north. So with these trade winds, they're mainly caused by this cold air sinking in the convection current, that cold air from the North Pole sinking down towards the equator. But you notice they curve. Okay, they don't go straight up and down. And that's all going to be because of that Coriolis effect, which is the curving of winds based on the rotation of the Earth. So they curve because of the Coriolis effect. And in this situation, they start in the east, okay, and they kind of then curve in the western direction. So these are trade winds, and we also have them in the southern hemisphere. They still start in the east, and now they curve to the left in the southern hemisphere. Okay, so these trade winds are called the trade winds because traders used to rely on them to move around the earth. They used boats, and these winds would move the sails of their ships when they're in these areas. And that's why they're called the trade winds. They're ongoing, they're caused by a convection current, and they move primarily from the east to the west. Okay, so those are our trade winds. All right, so let me get rid of these marks. Sorry for the delay there. And now let's go to, let's do the prevailing westerlies. I'm circling one of those now. Okay, so the prevailing westerlies, okay, you'll notice there's some up here in the northern hemisphere, and there's also some down here in the southern hemisphere. The name prevailing westerlies, prevailing means they're ongoing, okay, they're not stopping. And since there's westerlies in the name, they start from the west, and now they curve towards the east. Remember, the name of a wind is always where it starts from. So down here in the southern hemisphere, we also have prevailing westerlies that start in the west, and because of that Coriolis effect, they curve towards the east. Now, the prevailing westerlies, they're also winds that blow towards the poles. Okay, so we have air blowing towards the poles, and now they curve to the east because of the Coriolis effect. And these winds, if you notice up here in the northern hemisphere, they're kind of right over the United States. These prevailing westerlies really affect our weather. They kind of move air over the United States, and they affect the weather and climate of different areas. All right, so those are the prevailing westerlies, another global wind. So far we've done the trade winds and the prevailing westerlies. We also have at the top and the bottom of the globe, as I get rid of the mark around prevailing westerlies, we also have, and we'll use green for this again, we also have way up here and also way down at the bottom. I have to move my page a bit, but we can do that. Way down at the bottom, we have the polar easterlies. Well, from the name, we can tell that they're in the polar zones. So we have the North Pole and the South Pole. And this, again, is going to be cold air. The polar easterlies are cold air that's sinking towards the equator. We call them easterlies because in both of these situations, and you can tell the little red arrows, they start in the east and they curve to the west. So they start in the east and they curve to the west. And let me get rid of this green mark up here so we can better see the red arrow. There we go. That's better. Let me zoom in on it too. You can see this arrow up here that starts up in the east and curves down to the west. It's bringing cold air down from the polar zones. So that's your polar easterly. And this is a very important area because this cold air often meets the prevailing westerlies that are further down below. And when this cold and warm air meets, we have a polar front. And that also, where they meet, affects the weather of the United States. So both the polar easterlies bringing that cold air down and the prevailing westerlies affect the weather of the United States. So very important stuff there. So let me go down, zoom back out, get my pointer here. And I want to identify a couple more areas on the globe too. Another area right along the equator, we have the doldrums. Now, the doldrums are an area where there's really little wind. It's very calm. That's that whole equator area is a doldrum area. It's pretty calm there. I don't want to say that there's no winds, but it's very calm, very little winds. Another area of calm winds are the horse latitudes, which is at 30 north. Okay, I'm going across with my mouse pointer right now. 30 north is a horse latitude. And we also have a horse latitude down here at 30 south. Okay, this is again where air meets, but it's very calm there at these horse latitude areas. Now they call it the horse latitudes because people, back in the day, they used to get stuck in these areas because of the lack of wind. So they'd often have to throw their horses overboard. So the horses weren't taking away from the water and stuff that the people needed to drink. They kind of had to get rid of them. I don't know if that was true or not. It's kind of like a tale of the past. But either way, that's how these areas got the names horse latitudes because, people got stuck there. So the horse latitudes and the doldrums are both calm areas. Okay, so we've covered both of those. Now, for today's assignment, this is actually a diagram from the textbook. I'll attach it to Google Classroom today if you need it. But today's assignment, I'm going to go into my drive. Bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to bring up another file. And let's see, here it is. All right, so this is the assignment for today. It's kind of a blank winds diagram. And you're going to use the Kami, K-A-M-I extension that's on Google Classroom. And we're going to give this a try. I hope it works out. But what you're going to do is there's a key, a legend down here at the bottom where there's 6 things you have to identify. I thought about this and I said, well, let's let you pick the color. So for example, there's the prevailing westerlies. You pick a color for the prevailing westerlies. Let's say you want them to be red. So mark the little box here red. You don't have to color it all in. You just put a red mark in the box. And then up here on the diagram, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, you'll see that there's arrows on the diagram. Okay, you might have to like adjust your screen a little bit to see those arrows, but I want you to color in all the arrows that represent a prevailing westerly, the color that you chose. Again, you don't have to color in the whole arrow, but make a mark on the arrow that shows me that you know which arrows are the prevailing westerlies. Don't forget to include them all, not just one, but all of them. So use the video or the textbook page to help you with that. You're going to do the same thing with the northeast trades, the southeast trades, polar easterlies. I also want you to identify the doldrum area. Try to do the whole thing the best you can, and both of the horse latitude areas. If you need any help, remember, pick a color for each of these. Yes, they should each be a different color. So you're going to have 6 different colors on your diagram. I gave you some tips over here for each of them. And then you can also go back to the video or the textbook diagram. So this should be all nice and colorful when you're done. Again, you'll see the arrows on there. You're going to put a color marker to kind of show what they're representing on the diagram using Kami. Okay, that's an extension you have on Google Classroom that you can mark up. This is a PDF file, so you should be able to mark it up. Okay, so global winds, big, large-scale winds. They're still caused by unequal heating, convection currents, and high-low pressure. And they affect our weather. They move air across the globe. So keep that in mind. They're just different from a local wind because they're large scale. Complete your assignment for today. And remember, these winds curve because of the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth that makes them curve, that we will discuss in more detail in the upcoming days. Have a great day, Aurora. Talk to you soon.